With Arlecchino's release less than a week away, I wanted to take some time to discuss what I think will be her most ideal teams. In today's video, we're going to go over 5 specific teams where I think Father will flourish in. I'll also throw in a 6th one, which is just kind of a meme fun team, which I do think if you have the right pieces, it can work. So stay tuned to the end for that one. But let's get into it. Now, let's start with the first team comp. I'm calling this team comp Father of Vapes. This will probably be the team that I run. Obviously, Huta will be our fill-in for Arlecchino, but I do think this team covers a lot of the bases. You're going to have Yelan using her burst to pair well with Arlecchino's normal attack synergy. So obviously you could use Xingqiu in this as well. And then you're going to have Kazuha to swirl Pyro to do more Pyro damage. And then as we know, Arlecchino cannot correlate with other healers. She can only heal via her burst, but because she is an attack scaling character, obviously she's going to get a pretty significant boost from Bennett's burst. Now, the only problem I foresee with this team is at C0, you're definitely going to be very vulnerable and susceptible to dying. Because Arlecchino doesn't have the ability to interact with exterior heals, you're really dependent on her burst and being able to kind of spam her burst. So you're going to have to make sure your energy recharge is decent enough to where you're not dying. But I think the overall damage output of this team is very, very high. I think statistically it might be the highest. Again, not a math person, but I do think this team has very, very good synergy, and I do think she will flourish very, very well in it. Now, similar to the Father of Vape team comp, I think this team, kind of the more mono Pyro team, will also do a considerable amount of damage. Obviously, not reaction based, but you're getting the attack boost from having multiple Pyro characters, similar to what you did in the first team. But I just think this team will have so much damage output with popping Bennett's burst, snapshotting with Shangling, swirling with Kazuha, and then Arlecchino is just going crazy with her normal. So I do think this team is also very usable as well. I personally would prefer to have a Hydro character for the big Vapes, but because Arlecchino is normal attack dependent, she's not going to be able to vaporize every single normal hit, unlike Hu Tao can with her charge attacks. But all in all, I do think this team will have very good damage output. And I think if you don't have a really good Hydro character like Yelan or Xingqiu, I definitely think this team could pump out some very, very solid damage. Now, for probably the team I'm the most excited to try is the Overload team. So I think mathematically this Overload team is going to do a tremendous amount of damage. You have Fischl and you have Yaimiko giving a ton of secondary and tertiary damage, just supplemental damage. And then obviously you have Shev, who increases the damage of Overload by a significant percentage. And then you have Arlecchino going pretty crazy with her normal and her normal attacks and her rotation. So I'm really excited to test out this team comp. I don't have Shev, so I pray to the high heavens that she is on Arlecchino's banner, because I would love to test out Overload. But I do think this team probably as a whole has the highest damage ceiling. Now, obviously, Arlecchino won't necessarily be doing the most damage in this team herself, but I just think overall, this team has a huge, huge damage potential. I will say there could be some challenges with grouping, because obviously that's the knock on Overload, is you're going to overload an enemy and it's going to knock them back. But for bosses, it's not going to really matter. I do know Shev has a little bit of grouping built into her kit as well. But all in all, I am really excited to test out a team like this. Now, if you don't have Yaimiko like me, I also think you could supplement Raiden Shogun. Now, Raiden is definitely kind of an interesting pick here, because obviously she can be a main DPS herself, but because you can't get any other healing from external sources, Raiden can give Arlecchino her burst faster, so you can actually be able to spam Arlecchino's burst more frequently, so you get that heal. Because I know Arlecchino's burst doesn't provide the most healing, so you might be a little bit fragile, a little bit squishy, but pairing her with Raiden, you're still going to have a good amount of electro application to get those overloads off, and you're going to be able to get Arlecchino's burst back for more healing. So I think Yaimiko would be more damage, but maybe from a survivability standpoint and maybe just, a fluidity standpoint, I do think you could pop in Raiden Shogun as well. Now, I think this team is probably kind of the safer version of a Arlecchino team. Obviously, since she can't get external heals, a shielder is going to pair very well with her, aka Zhongli. With Zhongli, you're still going to get a decent amount of resistance shred, but obviously you have Yelan or Xingqiu to provide additional synergy with her normal attacks, and then Bennett providing his attack boost. So realistically, if you're like me and you suck at dodging, I do think this is a very safe alternative. Obviously, you're losing out on Kazuha and his swirl and his, damage increase. So I don't think this team has the best damage cap, but I do think, it's still going to have enough damage potential and output to clear most of the content in the game, and it's going to be very safe. You're not really going to be worried about dying because you have Zhongli, who's just OP with his shield. So all in all, I would say on a safeness scale, this is probably like the comfiest team. On a damage output team, I definitely think it's probably, third or fourth on the list as a whole, but still a very, very solid team. Now, the last official team that I had before kind of the meme team is the double Hydro team. Obviously, this team is phenomenal with Hu Tao. It's arguably Hu Tao's best team. Obviously, you would substitute Bennett for Zhongli, but Arlecchino won't get as much, usefulness or usability from double Hydro because she doesn't scale off HP like Hu Tao does. But you have two characters that synergize well with normal attack damage dealers, and you have Xingqiu to provide some damage mitigation with his rain swords, which can be very helpful at C0. I do think if you don't have a shielder, I do think Xingqiu is a fairly decent alternative. You could run Layla, you could run Diona, you could run Tank Faye, you could run Baiju, but none of those characters really synergize that well with Arlecchino on a whole. So I do think, double Hydro with, the two best Hydro sub DPS normal attack supports is still going to be very good. Obviously, I don't think it'll be good as Hu Tao with these two characters, but I do think this team has a very, very good damage output potential. And I do think, you're going to have pretty good survivability as well. You're going to be able to, funnel a decent amount of particles to Arlecchino with, Yelan and Xingqiu, especially if you're running, Sac Sword on Xingqiu and Sacrificial Bow on Yelan. Now, the last team, and I got to cover it because with the introduction of Cloud Retainer, she definitely opened up a ton more team comps, is the Plunge Father team. So obviously, Arlecchino doesn't see a tremendous amount of utility from Farina, which is unfortunate because Arlecchino doesn't get any past or external healing. But in a team with Cloud Retainer and Yelan, I do think this team could have some pretty solid damage output. Obviously, as a plunging character with Cloud Retainer, I do think there's going to be pretty good damage potential. You're still getting some residual damage, pretty decent residual damage increase from Farina, and then obviously pairing with Yelan as well. So, this is kind of the meme father plunge team. I would never run it. First of all, I don't have Cloud Retainer, and, I already have Zhao. I don't need any more plunge characters, but with the introduction of Cloud Retainer, you got to talk about plunge teams because they have very, very good damage output and potential. So, definitely thought I would throw it in there, but that's pretty much it. I just wanted to cover some teams where I think Father, aka Arlecchino, has some pretty good, damage potential. As I mentioned, I'm going to be running the Father of Vape, so with Yelan and Kazuha and Bennett. That's going to be my main team. If I'm, getting slapped around, because I suck at dodging, I'll throw in Zhongli and be good to go. But comment down below. I hope this video helped come up with some team comps for you. Hopefully you have most of these characters. If you have any questions about substitutes you can make, feel free to reach out in the comments. But are there any teams I missed out? Do you think there's other characters that are going to pair well with her as well? I really hope there's also other supports that come into the game down the road that synergize more fluidly with Arlecchino, which I do imagine there will be some, but that's pretty much it. I appreciate y'all so much for popping in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.